For 43 years, I thought I knew my own son. I was there when Glenn took his first steps across our kitchen floor. I held his hand on the first day of kindergarten when he was too scared to let go. I watched him graduate, get married, start a family of his own. I believed, truly believed, that the bond between a mother and her child was something that could never break. I was wrong. My husband Howard passed away on a Tuesday morning in July. He went peacefully, holding my hand, surrounded by the roses he had planted in our garden 30 years ago. We had been married for 43 years, building a life, building a company, building what I thought was a family that would carry on his legacy with love and with honor. The first sign that something was wrong came at the funeral. Glenn kept checking his phone during the service. His wife Nadine whispered in his ear,
And I saw something pass between them. A look I did not recognize.
like they were waiting for something. 3 days later, I found out exactly what they had been waiting for. It was me. They had been waiting for me to be too broken by grief to fight back. They had been waiting for the moment when they could take everything Howard and I had built and push me out like I was nothing more than an obstacle. My own son sat across from me in the boardroom of Mercer Logistics and let his wife demand that I sign over the company. He would not even look at me. But here is what they did not know. Here is what nobody knew until it was too late. I had found something, a secret they thought was buried forever. And that secret was about to destroy every plan they had made. Before I tell you what I discovered and how I made them pay for their betrayal, leave a comment below telling me where you are listening from. And hit subscribe if you believe that a mother's love can turn into a mother's justice. But let me start from the beginning. From the morning, everything changed. Thank you for being here with me. Before we begin, take a moment to drop a comment below. What are you doing as you listen? Driving? Cooking? Or maybe taking a quiet moment for yourself? I read every comment you leave. Just a quick note, this story includes some fictional details to highlight the lesson. What matters most is the message it carries. I sat at the far end of the mahogany conference table, looking at the people I used to call family. Morning light poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Mercer Logistics boardroom, casting long shadows across the polished wood. The smell of funeral lilies still drifted up from the lobby 3 floors below, mixing with my daughter-in-law's expensive perfume. My husband had been in the ground for exactly 72 hours, and already the vultures had assembled. Nadine stood at the head of the table, my husband's chair, the one he had occupied for 30 years. A 40-year-old woman in a designer black suit with perfectly manicured hands pressed flat against the wood. Not a single tear marked her flawless makeup. She had not cried at the funeral. She had not cried at the burial. I noticed these things. I noticed everything. Beside her sat my son Glenn, 42 years old, wearing the Italian suit I had bought him last Christmas. His eyes remained fixed on his polished shoes. Too much of a coward to meet my gaze. The boy I had raised, the child I had nursed through fevers and nightmares, could not look at his own mother while his wife circled like a shark. The silence hung heavy, broken only by the hum of air conditioning and the soft slide of documents across wood as Nadine pushed a stack of papers toward me. Now that the old man is gone, she said, her voice smooth as oil, it's time you sign this over to Brennan. You're too old to run this company alone. I let the words settle. The bitter taste of this morning's coffee still coated my tongue. My fingers found the cool leather armrest, steadying myself, not from weakness, but from the effort of containing what burned beneath my calm surface. Did they really believe I had spent 30 years building an empire only to hand it over without a fight? I had designed every contract in this building. I had reviewed every acquisition, negotiated every major deal while Howard shook hands and charmed clients. We were partners in everything: the business, the marriage, the life we built from nothing. And now this woman, who had married my son for access to our fortune, thought she could take it all with a pen and some paperwork. My silence seemed to unnerve Nadine. She shifted her weight, her composure cracking at the edges. Lorraine, she said, dropping the pretense of courtesy, don't make this difficult. Glenn and I have discussed it. The board has been consulted. This is happening whether you cooperate or not. I picked up the gold pen lying beside the documents. Heavy, Expensive. A gift from Howard on our 40th anniversary. I examined it slowly, turning it in the light. Your husband talked about family values while treating me like an ornament for 20 years, Nadine continued, her voice rising. A trucker who got lucky, that's all he ever was. It's our turn now. Glenn flinched, but he said nothing. I set the pen down with a soft click that seemed to echo in the silence. You just insulted my husband for the last time. Nadine's eyes narrowed. Sign the papers. Lorraine, no. The word hung in the air between us. Simple. Final. Nadine's face flushed red beneath her foundation. She opened her mouth to respond. But before I tell you what happened next, before I explain how a 65-year-old widow in a Navy funeral dress brought down an empire of lies, you need to understand something. You need to understand that I had been waiting for this moment, planning for it. For exactly 11 months, the boardroom doors swung open. Desmond Langley walked in first, my 55-year-old attorney with his steel-gray temples and the unreadable face he had perfected. Across 3 decades of courtroom battles, he moved with purpose, flanked by 2 figures in Navy windbreakers with yellow letters across the chest. FBI. Nadine's composure shattered. Glenn's head snapped up, his face draining of color. Desmond carried a single envelope. Without a word, without so much as glancing at Nadine or Glenn, he walked the length of the conference table and placed it directly in front of my daughter-in-law. Mrs. Mercer, he said, addressing me with the respect she had denied me all morning. Before you sign anything, I suggest your daughter-in-law read this. The envelope hit the table like a gunshot. Nadine's perfectly manicured fingers trembled as she reached for it. The confidence had drained from her face, replaced by something I had waited 11 months to see. Fear. Pure, unfiltered fear. She had no idea what was inside that envelope. But I did. I had known since August of last year, when a routine medical checkup revealed something that would unravel every lie this woman had woven into my family. I had spent 11 months gathering evidence, building alliances, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. They thought they were dealing with a grieving widow, a confused old woman too heartbroken to fight. They were wrong. To understand how I became the architect of my family's destruction and its salvation, you have to go back exactly 9 days. To the afternoon of my husband's funeral, when the last guest departed and I found myself alone in my kitchen. That was when Nadine first presented those papers. That was when I first understood what my own son had become. 9 days earlier, on the afternoon my husband was buried. The last mourner's car pulled away from the estate. For the first time in 42 years of marriage, I was truly alone. I stood at the kitchen window, watching the taillights disappear down our gravel drive. The golden evening light slanted through the glass, illuminating dust motes that danced above the granite countertop Howard had picked out 2 decades ago. His leather chair sat empty in the living room, still bearing the impression of his body. The smell of funeral lilies suffocated every corner of the house we had built together. 42 years of marriage reduced to casseroles and sympathy cards stacked on the dining table. I reached for my coffee, long, cold, and let the bitter taste remind me I was still alive, still here. Howard always said the quiet after a storm was when the real danger came. He was right about most things. He was especially right about that. The click of expensive heels on hardwood shattered my solitude. Nadine appeared in the kitchen doorway without knocking, her black designer suit still immaculate, not a hair out of place. Glenn trailed behind her like a shadow, his eyes finding the floor the moment they met mine. My daughter-in-law carried a thick manila folder pressed against her chest. A vulture does not wait for the body to cool. It circles the moment it smells weakness. Lorraine, Nadine said, her voice dripping with practiced sympathy. I know you need time to grieve. We all do. She crossed to the counter and placed the folder on the granite. Her fingers trembled as she slid it toward me, but I noticed the trembling was not from grief. Her eyes held the barely contained excitement of someone about to close a deal. The company needs stable leadership during this transition, she continued. Sign this and you can grieve in peace. We'll handle everything. I looked at the folder, then at my son, who still would not meet my eyes. What is it? I asked, though I already suspected. A simple succession document. It transfers operational control to Glenn and the board while you focus on healing. Temporary. Of course, there was nothing temporary about what she was proposing. Even a cursory glance at the document told me that. "Let me read it first," I said. Nadine's smile flickered. "Of course, but don't take too long. The board meets Friday." She patted my hand with the condescension of someone who believed she had already won. Glenn mumbled something about checking on me tomorrow and followed his wife out the door. I listened to their car start, heard the crunch of gravel fade into silence. You might wonder why I did not confront her right there, why I simply nodded and said I needed time, why I let her walk out believing she had found an easy mark. The answer waited in my nightstand drawer. That night, after midnight had settled over the house like a shroud, I sat on the edge of the bed Howard and I had shared for 4 decades. The lamp cast a warm circle of light across the nightstand, where his reading glasses still rested, waiting for hands that would never pick them up again. I opened the drawer. Beneath a stack of old letters and a worn Bible lay a yellowed photocopy, the same succession document Nadine had just presented to me. Same language, same provisions, same transfer of power away from me. But this copy was dated 11 months ago. Eugene Thornton, our 63-year-old head driver, who had been with the company since Howard drove trucks himself, had found it in a company car Nadine borrowed last August. A woman like her did not notice people like Eugene, the workers who kept the wheels turning while she planned her takeover. Eugene noticed everything. He had delivered this photocopy to me the same week, and I had kept it hidden ever since. They had started planning while Howard was still playing golf on Saturdays, 3 weeks before his first doctor's appointment. 4 months before the diagnosis that would eventually kill him. They had not seized an opportunity. They had created one. I traced the edge of our wedding photograph on the nightstand, Howard's young face smiling up at me from 42 years ago. We had started with nothing. 1 truck, 1 contract, 1 stubborn belief that hard work meant something. We built an empire together. Every contract bore my legal review. Every acquisition carried my signature beside his. They thought I was a housewife who got lucky, a grieving widow too devastated to read the fine print. They forgot who had written every contract this company ever signed. I set the photocopy beside Howard's photograph and made him a promise in the darkness of our bedroom. "They're coming for me tomorrow," I whispered. "They think I'm broken. They think I'm alone." I picked up his reading glasses, felt the familiar weight in my palm. They just don't know I've been waiting. The house settled around me with familiar creaks and groans. Outside, the Texas wind moved through the oak trees Howard had planted the year Glenn was born. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to its pack. I did not sleep that night. I planned. And the next morning, I arrived at Mercer Logistics at 6 a.m., my habit for 30 years. Only this time, when I reached the archive door, my master keycard was denied. The red light blinked twice, and the archive door stayed locked. I swiped my master keycard again, the same card that had opened every door in this building for 3 decades. The same result, access denied. The electronic beep echoed through the empty executive floor, mocking 30 years of habit. Having trouble with the door. Lorraine. The voice came from the shadows of the break room hallway. Carlton Farrell emerged with a coffee cup in his manicured hand, his custom Italian suit already pressed and perfect at 6 in the morning. At 45, our CFO wore success like a second skin, expensive cologne, practiced smile, and eyes as cold as the marble floor beneath his polished shoes. He had come to Mercer Logistics 8 years ago with impeccable references and an ambition that Howard never quite trusted. Howard's instincts were rarely wrong. Security system overhaul. Carlton explained, that rehearsed smile never reaching his eyes. Glenn ordered it yesterday. All access is being migrated to new protocols. I felt the words land like a blow to my chest. Glenn ordered it. He thought it best to handle company security while you take time to grieve. Carlton's voice dripped with manufactured sympathy. You should go home and rest, Lorraine. The company is in good hands. Good hands. My son's hands. Signing orders to lock me out of the building I helped build with my own. How long had Glenn been conspiring against me? How many documents had he signed while I sat beside his dying father, holding Howard's hand through the final weeks? "Of course," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Thank you for letting me know." I turned toward the elevator, feeling Carlton's eyes on my back. He would report this encounter to Nadine within the hour. The grieving widow had come to work out of confusion, tried to access the archives, and been gently redirected home. They would congratulate themselves on how smoothly their plan was proceeding. They had no idea where I was actually going. I pressed the elevator button for B1, a floor that had not appeared on building blueprints since 1995. When Howard decided that certain things were better kept off the official records, the doors opened onto a dim corridor thick with dust and the smell of old paper. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a brass key, warm from resting against my body. Howard had given it to me on our 20th anniversary, pressing it into my palm with a whisper, "Just in case." They controlled the servers. They controlled the digital records. They controlled the modern locks and the security protocols and the executive access cards. But they had made a fatal mistake. They thought they controlled the kingdom because they held the digital keys. But the foundation was made of paper, and paper remembers. The storage room door groaned open on hinges that had not moved in years. Inside, filing cabinets lined the walls like sentinels, each one containing decades of original contracts, handwritten ledgers, trust documents drafted in my own careful script. Everything before 1998 existed only in this room, the paper trail that predated their digital empire. In the far corner sat a safe that Howard had installed himself in 1989. I knelt before it, my knees protesting against the cold concrete floor. The combination was our wedding anniversary, followed by Glenn's birthday, following by the year we signed our first $1 million contract. Numbers that meant everything to us and nothing to anyone else. The safe opened with a familiar click. Inside, exactly as I remembered, 30 years of original contracts, handwritten amendments, the trust documents that governed the company's ownership structure, everything Nadine would need to forge her takeover, and everything that would prove the forgery if she tried. But beneath the stacks of paper, my fingers found something unexpected. A sealed envelope in Howard's handwriting, addressed to me. I pulled it into the dim light, my heart hammering against my ribs. The date on the envelope read June 15th, 3 weeks before Howard took his last breath, 2 weeks before hospice. 1 week before his hands became too weak to hold a pen. He had known something. At the end, when his body was failing, and I thought his mind was drifting toward whatever came next, my husband had been alert enough to write me a letter. To prepare something, to hide it in the one place he trusted me to look when everything fell apart. My husband's handwriting stared up at me from beyond the grave, and I found I was not ready to hear what he had to say. I pressed the envelope to my chest, feeling the rough texture of the paper against my palm. Dust coated my lips and tears burned behind my eyes. But I would not cry here, not in a basement, surrounded by the bones of our empire, while vultures circled above. Howard deserved better than that. I tucked the letter into my coat pocket, still sealed. Tonight, when I was alone with his photograph in the silence of our bedroom, I would read his final words. Tonight, I would let myself grieve for what was lost and rage for what was being stolen. But not now. Now, I had work to do. I gathered the trust documents, the original contracts. Everything that proved ownership of Mercer Logistics resided with me, and not with whatever papers Nadine planned to slide across a conference table. I photographed each page with my phone, then returned them to the safe. The evidence was secure, the letter was waiting, and my son had revealed himself as an enemy. I climbed back toward the surface, ready for whatever came next. I never got the chance to read Howard's letter that night. The phone rang at 7:15 a.m. with the words every grandparent dreads. Accident, hospital, come now. I was still in my coat from the basement, the sealed envelope pressing against my chest like a second heartbeat, when I grabbed my keys and ran for the car. St. David's Medical Center was a blur of fluorescent lights and antiseptic corridors. I found Glenn and Nadine in the trauma ward waiting area. Nadine pacing in designer heels that clicked against the linoleum like gunshots, barking into her phone about helicopter transport costs. Glenn slumped against the wall, looking gray as old dishwater. His expensive suit wrinkled, tie loosened. "How bad is it?" I demanded. Glenn's voice came out hollow. "Deep laceration on his thigh. Mountain bike hit a guardrail on the Barton Creek Trail. He lost a lot of blood. They're prepping for surgery." My grandson, Brennan, 18 years old, with his father's lanky build and his mother's sharp cheekbones, somewhere beyond those trauma bay doors, fighting for his life. The boy I had held as an infant watched take his first steps. Cheered at graduation just last month. I lowered myself into a cold plastic chair and prayed to a God I had been ignoring since Howard's diagnosis. Nadine stabbed at her phone. "I don't care what it costs. Get the blood here, now!" The double doors swung open. "Doctor!" Nathan Reeves emerged, a tired-looking trauma surgeon in blood-spotted scrubs with a clipboard in his hands and news that would rewrite my family's history. "Mrs. Mercer." He looked between the three of us. "Brennan is stable, but he needs an immediate transfusion. Our blood bank is running short on his type." "Whatever he needs," Nadine snapped. "Name the hospital. I'll have it flown in." "We're hoping for family donors," Dr. Reeves continued. "Anyone who matches AB positive." AB positive. The words hit me like a truck on black ice. I sat very still in that plastic chair, feeling the world tilt beneath me. Howard was type O. I was type A. That meant Glenn should be either A or O. There was no other genetic possibility. Two parents without a B allele cannot produce a child with AB blood. Biology did not lie. Mathematics did not negotiate. If Brennan was AB positive, then Glenn was not his biological father. "Can either of you be typed right now?" Dr. Reeves asked, oblivious to the bomb he had just detonated in our family. Nadine's voice rose an octave. "Just call another hospital. Money is not the issue here. My son needs blood, and you're asking about typing?" She wasn't panicking about Brennan's blood type. She was panicking because I was standing here doing arithmetic. I turned slowly to look at my son. Glenn was pressed against the wall, sweating through his collar despite the hospital's aggressive air conditioning. His eyes were fixed on the floor. Those same expensive shoes. That same inability to meet my gaze. But this time, I understood why. How long had my son known he was raising another man's child, and why had he chosen to deceive us all? "Glenn," I said quietly. He flinched like I had struck him. "Glenn, look at me." Nadine's voice grew louder, more frantic, filling the corridor with noise about helicopter pilots and specialist surgeons and money being no object. She was building a wall of sound between Glenn and me, trying to prevent the conversation that was about to happen. But Glenn finally raised his head. Our eyes met across that sterile corridor, and in my son's face I saw the truth he had been hiding for 18 years. Not confusion, not surprise at impossible genetics. Terror, pure animal terror at being caught. He had always known. In 42 years of marriage, Howard and I never kept secrets from each other. We built a company on trust, raised a family on honesty, faced every hardship together. And now I learned that our son, the boy we had raised with those same values, had deceived us for nearly 2 decades. Brennan was not a Mercer by blood. Someone else's DNA ran through that boy's veins, and Glenn had known it since the beginning. The questions multiplied in my mind like cancer cells. Who was the real father? Did Howard know before he died? Was this why Nadine was so confident about taking over the company? Because she had been holding the secret over Glenn's head for years. "I'll donate," I said to Dr. Reeves, my voice steady despite the earthquake inside me. "Type A, it won't match, but I'll donate anyway. WW." The doctor nodded and gestured for a nurse to escort me. As I stood, I felt Howard's letter shift against my chest. He had known something was wrong in his final weeks. He had prepared a message for me. Perhaps he had discovered the same terrible truth. I walked toward the donation room without looking back at my son. I could feel Glenn's eyes on me, feel Nadine's careful silence as she realized her wall of noise had failed. The investigation had just expanded beyond corporate fraud. Somewhere in this city was a man whose blood flowed through my grandson's veins. Someone Nadine had chosen over Glenn 18 years ago. Someone who might be connected to everything that was happening now. I was going to find out who he was. And then I was going to destroy them all. Brennan survived surgery. I stayed until the doctors confirmed he was stable, then left the hospital without speaking another word to Glenn or Nadine. There would be time for that conversation later. First, I needed allies. The diner smelled like coffee and diesel fuel, the same way it had smelled when Howard and I celebrated our first $1 million contract here 30 years ago. Magnolia Cafe sat at the intersection of two trucking routes, its parking lot filled with rigs bearing the Mercer Logistics logo. Our drivers had been eating here since before some of them were born. Eugene Thornton waited in the corner booth, a weathered 62-year-old with calloused hands and silver stubble catching the afternoon light. He had driven our first delivery truck in 1987 when the whole company was Howard Me, and a second-hand Peterbilt with a temperamental transmission. Now he sat across from me with news that made my blood run cold. "She cleaned house the morning after the funeral," Eugene said, keeping his voice low. "Anyone who remembered you and Howard building this company, gone. 7 of us, 30 years of experience, out the door before lunch." I wrapped my hands around the coffee cup, feeling its heat against my palms. Who authorized it? Carlton processed the paperwork, but Nadine gave the order. Eugene's jaw tightened. Said it was restructuring. Said we were redundant. "Mrs. Mercer, I've got a mortgage and a wife with medical bills." They knew exactly who to cut. Nadine had not just fired employees. She had amputated the company's memory, cutting away everyone who might remember what Mercer Logistics looked like before she arrived. Everyone who might notice when things started to change. "There's more," Eugene continued. "The boys and I, the ones who got fired, we've been keeping our eyes open. We know every road in this city, every loading dock, every warehouse. Carlton's been making midnight runs to a cold storage place out in Manor. 3 boxes so far. Heavy boxes. Document boxes. You followed him." I followed him. Eugene slid a napkin across the table with an address scrawled in pencil. "Lone Star Cold Storage, Unit 47. He's got the only key." I looked at the address, then at the man who had risked his own future to help me. "Keep watching. Don't let them see you. And Eugene, thank you for staying loyal." He shook his head. "Your husband gave me a chance when nobody else would. I owe him. I owe you both." We parted in the parking lot, 2 conspirators in a war that no one else knew had started. That evening, alone in the estate, I spread the succession documents across Howard's desk and began to read. Not skim read. Every word, every clause, every piece of legal jargon that Nadine assumed a grieving widow would be too devastated to examine. Page 1 through 22 contained exactly what she had described: transfer of operational control, board restructuring, stock realignment. Aggressive, certainly, designed to strip me of power while maintaining the appearance of family unity. But not illegal. Page 23 was different. How many nights had they spent crafting this document, burying the poison so deep that a grieving widow would never think to look? The indemnification clause was buried in paragraph 4, subclause C, written in language designed to make eyes glaze over. It stated that by signing, I would authenticate and assume responsibility for all financial transactions executed under the Mercer Family Trust during the previous 12 months. My hands began to shake. I pulled up the company financial records I had photographed in the basement. The employee pension fund, the retirement savings of 300 workers who had dedicated their careers to Mercer Logistics showed a shortfall. A significant shortfall. $3.2 million had vanished. Wire transfers, executed over 10 months. Small amounts at first, then larger. All of them bearing authorization codes that traced back to accounts I had never heard of, using verification methods that had not existed when Howard was healthy enough to oversee the books. They were not just stealing the company, they were building a paper trail that led directly to my signature. If I signed this document, I would not just lose Mercer Logistics, I would confess to embezzling my own employees' retirement savings. Federal wire fraud, conspiracy. At my age, a conviction would mean dying in prison. $3.2 million, 15 years in prison, and my signature would seal the confession. The audit was 18 days away. the annual review that Howard had always insisted upon, even when the board grumbled about costs and inconvenience. They needed my signature before the investigators found the hole, before anyone started asking where the money went and who actually took it. I set the document down on Howard's desk and stared at the wall where our first business license still hung, yellowed with age. 30 years of building something good. 30 years of taking care of our people. And now those same people would lose their retirements while I rotted in a cell, framed for crimes committed by my own family. They did not want me to grieve in peace. They wanted me to sign my own conviction. I pulled Howard's sealed letter from my coat pocket and held it in my hands. Whatever he had written, whatever warning he had left, I needed to read it now, tonight, before the walls closed in any further. 18 days until the audit. 18 days to prove the thieves were not the grieving widow, but the vultures who had been circling since before my husband took his last breath. The numbers did not lie, but people did, and these numbers proved exactly when the lying had started. I sat at Howard's computer in his private study, the desk lamp casting a warm circle of light across decades of accumulated wisdom. His reading glasses still sat beside the keyboard. His coffee mug still bore the ring of his last cup. And his computer still held the digital fingerprints of a conspiracy that began long before anyone claimed. The succession document properties showed a creation date of August 14th. August 14th of last year. I stared at the screen until my eyes burned. Howard's first doctor's appointment, the one where they found the shadow on his lung, was July 23rd of this year. His diagnosis came in August. The hospice conversations started in September. But this document, the one Nadine had slid across my kitchen counter with rehearsed sympathy, had been created 11 months before Howard knew he was sick. Someone had been patient. Someone had been waiting. Someone had drafted a plan to steal our company before my husband even felt the first cough. Howard's cologne still lingered in the leather chair where I sat. I wondered if he had sat here in those final months, signing papers they slid in front of him, trusting the wrong people, while I brought him soup and adjusted his pillows. How many times had Carlton walked into this office with documents for a dying man to sign? How many times had my husband's trembling hand authorized his own robbery? My hands had been shaking since I discovered the pension theft. Now they stopped. Grief crystallized into something harder, colder, more useful. I reached for my phone and found Desmond's number. He answered on the third ring, his voice thick with interrupted sleep. "Lorraine, it's past midnight. I need you to listen," I said. I found something. I walked him through the document properties. The creation dates. The timeline that made no sense unless you understood what it really meant. Desmond was silent for a long moment after I finished. "August of last year," he repeated slowly. "That's 11 months before Howard's diagnosis." "They didn't see an opportunity and seize it," I said. "They planned this. They were waiting for him to get sick. Maybe even—" I stopped, the thought too dark to finish. "Maybe even hoping for it." Desmond completed the sentence I could not. "Lorraine, this changes everything. Opportunistic fraud is one thing. Premeditated conspiracy is federal." Part of me wanted to burn it all down, storm into the board meeting tomorrow and throw these papers on the table. Let the whole company see what Nadine and Carlton had done. Watch Glenn's face when he realized his mother knew everything. But 47 years of marriage had taught me that revenge served cold cuts deeper than revenge served hot. Howard used to say that his father's wisdom, passed down from the Depression, the patient hunter always eats. "I have photographs of documents from the company archives," I told Desmond. "Original contracts, trust papers, the chain of custody on everything." "Good, but we need more." I could hear Desmond thinking, his legal mind working through the implications. The pension money, that's the hook. But to prove premeditated fraud, we need to show they had access to Howard's authentic signatures before the forgery started. "Do you know where they could have gotten samples?" The question landed like a punch. I thought of the cold storage facility Eugene had mentioned. Carlton making midnight runs with boxes of documents. A location off the company books where certain records had been kept for decades. But there was another storage unit. One that had nothing to do with the company. Howard kept a personal archive, I said slowly. Old documents from before Mercer Logistics went corporate, original contracts with his signature from the early days. He rented a storage unit for them 30 years ago. Who knew about it? Family. The word tasted bitter on my tongue. Anyone who had been to the estate. Anyone who had seen him use the key. Glenn knew about the unit. Nadine knew. Carlton had been to our home a dozen times for holiday dinners and company celebrations. Any of them could have accessed it. Any of them could have stolen Howard's signatures while he was dying. Lorraine, Desmond said, his voice gentle but firm. This isn't just theft anymore. This is federal wire fraud, conspiracy. If we can prove premeditation, we're talking about serious prison time for everyone involved. I looked at the framed photograph on Howard's desk, our wedding day. Both of us so young and certain that hard work would be enough. We built an empire together. We raised a son. We trusted the wrong people. Then let's prove it, I said. Contact your FBI connections. Tell them what we have. I'll handle the storage unit tomorrow. Be careful if they know you're investigating. They think I'm a grieving widow signing papers without reading them. Let them keep thinking that. I ended the call and set the phone down beside Howard's glasses. The storage unit key was still on my keychain, right where Howard had put it 3 years ago. Right where Nadine had watched me use it a dozen times when we retrieved old photographs for company anniversaries. They thought they were robbing a dying man. They did not realize they had woken up his widow. Tomorrow, I would find out exactly what they had been stealing and how long they had been watching. The warehouse doors told a story in corporate logos. 4 shell companies. 4 lies, all pointing back to Carlton. Eugene parked his pickup truck behind a stand of mesquite trees, half a mile from Lone Star Cold Storage. The manor facility sat at the end of an industrial road, surrounded by scrubland and silence. Through my binoculars, I could see 4 warehouse bays, each marked with different signage. Meridian Holdings, Compass Point Ventures, Blue Bonnet Asset Management, Red River Capital Partners. 4 companies I had never heard of, occupying space in a facility I had not known existed, all connected to the man my husband had trusted with his finances. That's Meridian Holdings on door 3, Eugene said, pointing at the largest bay. Same name that appeared on those invoices you photographed. I lowered the binoculars. The invoice had been buried in last year's ledger, filed under consulting fees. Howard had signed it without question. Why would he question his own CFO? But the amount had always bothered me, $78,000 for services never specified. Now I knew where those services were housed. 4 companies, 4 doors. I lifted the binoculars again and photographed each logo, each door, each license plate in the gravel lot. How much of my husband's money is rotting in there? Warehouses keep things cold to preserve them. Carlton was preserving evidence of his own crimes. Frozen in plain sight while my husband died, trusting him with everything. That evening, Desmond arranged a meeting at a downtown Austin hotel neutral ground, away from any office where walls might have ears. I arrived through a service entrance, feeling like a character in one of Howard's beloved spy novels. The man waiting in the conference room was no character. Special Agent Marshall Kemp rose as I entered, a lean figure in a gray suit with the kind of eyes that had seen too much and remembered all of it. 20 years of white-collar crime investigations had left him with careful movements and an expression that gave nothing away. "Mrs. Mercer," he said, extending his hand, "I've been watching Carlton Farrell for 3 years. You've accomplished more in 5 days than my entire team." I took his hand. His grip was firm, but not aggressive. "Then you know what he's been doing." "I know what he's been building." Kemp gestured for me to sit. Desmond was already at the table, his face grim. Shell companies, false invoices, a network designed to siphon funds from legitimate businesses into untraceable accounts. Your husband's company wasn't his first target, just his most ambitious. 3 years. The FBI had been watching Carlton for 3 years, while Howard trusted him completely. While I brought him Christmas cookies and invited him to family dinners. While he sat at our table and planned to steal everything we had built. "What do you need from me?" I asked. "Evidence." Kemp opened a folder and spread surveillance photographs across the table. Carlton entering the warehouse. Carlton loading boxes into his car. Carlton meeting with men I did not recognize. We have circumstantial proof of a network, but we lack documentation of intent. The succession documents you found, the premeditation, the pension theft, the forged signatures. That's the connection we've been missing. Desmond leaned forward. Marshall has a proposal. Kemp's careful eyes met mine. The board meeting, Friday. I understand they're expecting you to sign transfer documents. They're expecting me to confess to crimes I didn't commit. Exactly. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. I want you to let them think you're going to do it. The room went quiet. I understood immediately what he was asking. You want me to play the grieving widow, I said. The confused old woman who doesn't understand what she's signing. I want you to wear a wire and let them incriminate themselves. Every word, every threat, every piece of coercion, recorded and admissible. Kemp's voice was steady. You've already proven you're not weak, Mrs. Mercer. Now I need you to pretend you are. The irony was not lost on me. The very performance they expected from me, helpless, overwhelmed, ready to surrender, would become the weapon that destroyed them. Sometimes the strongest move is letting your enemy believe you have already been defeated. I can do that, I said. There's one more thing. Kemp slid another photograph across the table. This one was grainy, taken at night, showing Carlton beside the warehouse with a second figure. The second man wore a uniform, a sheriff's deputy uniform. Carlton has friends in local law enforcement, Kemp said. That's Deputy Marcus Webb. He's been providing security for Carlton's operations and alerting him whenever anyone gets too close. My blood ran cold. If Carlton had law enforcement in his pocket, calling local authorities would have meant warning him. Every move I might have made through normal channels would have been reported before I finished dialing. This operation stays federal, Kemp continued. Trust no one local. Not the sheriff, not the police, not anyone wearing a badge who isn't standing in this room. I looked at the photograph of Carlton and his uniformed protector. The conspiracy was larger than I had imagined. It extended beyond my family, beyond my company, into the institutions meant to protect people like me. But now I had institutions of my own. Friday, I said. I'll give you everything you need. Kemp nodded once. And we'll give them everything they deserve. The knowledge that Carlton had a deputy in his pocket changed everything and nothing. The sting was still our best option. Now it was our only option. The morning after my meeting with Agent Kemp, I found myself in my garden with pruning shears in hand. The roses needed attention, their stems overgrown with the neglect of my grief. I cut away dead wood with practiced movements. Each snip a meditation on what needed trimming in my own life. Eugene arrived at 9, parking his truck behind the garage where it could not be seen from the road. He found me among the yellow roses Howard had planted for our anniversary, my hands dirty with soil and purpose. You look like a woman with a plan, he said. I have a poison to plant. I set down the shears and brushed earth from my gloves. Nadine and Carlton have worked together for 19 years. That's a long time to build trust and a long time to build suspicion. Eugene's eyes narrowed with understanding. What do you need me to spread? A rumor? Through someone Nadine trusts. Someone who wouldn't know they're being used. I had thought about this carefully during sleepless hours. Tell them you heard from a contact at the audit firm that the widow Mercer is cooperating with investigators, that she's provided documents showing Carlton has been maintaining a personal slush fund separate from anything Nadine knew about. Is there a slush fund? There might be. Men like Carlton always keep something for themselves. I smiled without warmth. But it doesn't matter if it's true. What matters is that Nadine will believe it's true. She spent 19 years wondering if her partner is skimming from their operation. Now I'm going to confirm her worst suspicions. 19 years of conspiracy, and all it took was one whispered lie to make them see each other as the enemy. Eugene nodded slowly. You're turning them against each other without lifting a finger. Howard taught me that the best battles are won before the enemy knows they've started. I picked up my shears again. Make sure the rumor reaches Nadine through someone she trusts. Let her imagination do the rest. Greed is a powerful fertilizer for paranoia. He left with his instructions, and I returned to my roses. The yellow blooms reminded me of Howard's face when he planted them. Proud, hopeful, certain that beauty could be cultivated with patience and care. He would have hated what I was doing now. The manipulation, the calculated cruelty, the weaponization of human weakness. But Howard was dead, and gentle methods had died with him. The afternoon brought Eugene back to my kitchen with news that made the waiting worthwhile. "It worked," he said, accepting the coffee I poured. "Better than we could have hoped." "Tell me." "My contact at the loading dock, he's got a cousin who cleans offices at the corporate center. She said Nadine called Carlton in for a meeting around noon. Closed door, 90 minutes. Eugene's weathered face creased with satisfaction. Carlton's face was red as a taillight when he stormed out. He was shouting something about loyalty and how he'd given everything to this operation. I sat down across from him, feeling the weight of exhaustion and triumph in equal measure. And Nadine, cold as ice, apparently, didn't raise her voice once, just kept asking questions. Where was the money? What accounts did she not know about? Why had he been meeting with lawyers without telling her? How many times had Nadine smiled at Carlton across conference tables while calculating what he might be hiding from her? How many years had she watched her partner's lifestyle and wondered if his share was truly equal to hers? The seed I planted had found fertile soil. Greed is a partnership until someone suspects they're getting the smaller share, I said. Nadine's been waiting for an excuse to believe Carlton was cheating her. I just gave her permission to trust her instincts. Eugene took a long drink of coffee. His expression shifted, and I recognized the look of a man deciding whether to share difficult news. "There's one more thing," he said slowly. During the shouting, my contact heard Nadine say something else. Something about an insurance policy. Insurance policy. Not the regular kind. The way she said it, it sounded like a contingency plan, something they've been holding back. Eugene set down his cup. And she said they needed to move the timeline up. Whatever they're planning for the board meeting, they're not waiting until Friday anymore. The triumph I had been savoring turned to ash in my mouth. I had destabilized their alliance. Yes, but wounded animals are more dangerous than confident ones. Nadine was not going to retreat. She was going to accelerate. The board meeting trap that Agent Kemp was carefully preparing might spring before we were ready. "When?" I asked. "Tomorrow." The cleaning woman heard Nadine telling Carlton they're calling an emergency session, 9 a.m. Tomorrow. I had less than 18 hours to warn the FBI, adjust the sting operation, and prepare myself for a performance that would either save everything or destroy it. I reached for my phone. Agent Kemp needed to know that the timeline had just collapsed. The hunt was accelerating, and the hunters were about to become the hunted. Agent Kemp confirmed the accelerated timeline within an hour. The sting would proceed tomorrow morning, earlier than planned, but still viable. I had one night left to prepare. The envelope had sat in my nightstand drawer since I found it in the basement safe. Howard's final words, waiting for me to be strong enough to read them. That night, with the house silent around me and the weight of tomorrow pressing down, I finally broke the seal. His handwriting was shaky, written in those final weeks when his body was failing, but his mind remained sharp. The letter was dated 3 weeks before he died. "My dearest Lorraine, if you're reading this, I'm gone and you're fighting. I always knew you would fight. You were always the stronger one, even when you let me pretend otherwise. I've watched Glenn change over these past years. He used to be our boy curious, kind, eager to learn. Now he only echoes what Nadine tells him. He has become a man who needs someone to tell him what to think. And I fear she has become that someone." I suspected something was wrong with the finances. Small discrepancies, questions that got answered too quickly, too smoothly. But I was tired, Lorraine. Tired and sick and too weak to face what I might find. I chose denial over confrontation. That was my final failure. Howard had underestimated his own son. He had underestimated his daughter-in-law, but he had also underestimated his wife. Only one of those mistakes would matter now. The letter continued. "The company name is us, our whole life together. From that first truck to every building we raised, don't let them change it. Don't let them erase what we built, and don't let them turn you into someone you're not. You were always stronger than me, Lorraine. In every way that mattered. I married up, and I knew it from the first day. Fight for what's ours, but fight smart. You always did know when to wait and when to strike. All my love, forever. Howard. I pressed the letter to my chest and let the tears come. Not tears of weakness, tears of purpose. He had known. Not everything, but enough, and he had trusted me to finish what he could not. Before I tell you what I did next, the performance that would either save everything or destroy it, I want to pause. Are you still with me? Because this is where everything turns. If you've made it this far, comment your prediction. Do you think Glenn will stay loyal to Nadine? Or break? Type your answer and tell me why in 5 words or less. A quick note, the next part includes some dramatized details to deepen the emotional impact. What matters is the lesson behind it. The next evening, I invited Glenn and Nadine to the estate. I had spent the morning with Agent Kemp's technician, learning how to wear the wire without detection. The device sat against my skin like a second heartbeat, recording everything. I dressed in black, still in mourning. Still performing grief, and held Howard's photograph in hands that trembled with real emotion and calculated timing. Playing weak when you're strong is its own form of strength. Women of my generation learned that lesson early. We learned to survive by letting others underestimate us. Nadine arrived first, heels clicking on the hardwood with the confidence of someone who believed victory was assured. Glenn followed, his eyes darting between his wife and his mother, caught in a trap of his own making. I asked you here because I've made a decision, I said, my voice quavering just enough. I can't fight anymore. Howard would want peace in this family. Nadine's eyes lit with barely concealed triumph. That's very wise. Lorraine, we all want what's best for the company. I'll sign at the board meeting tomorrow, I continued, publicly, so everyone knows I'm stepping aside willingly. That's very gracious of you. Nadine glanced at Glenn. Her expression, a silent command, say nothing that might change her mind. But Glenn was watching me, really watching me, for the first time in years. Mom, he said slowly, are you sure? I saw it then, the flicker of guilt in his eyes. The boy I had raised was still in there somewhere, buried beneath years of Nadine's influence. He knew what they were doing was wrong. He had always known. I'm sure, I said softly. Family is what matters. Nadine stood, eager to leave before I could reconsider. She walked out like a cat who had cornered a mouse, satisfied and certain. She did not notice the mouse had claws. Glenn lingered at the door, for a moment. I thought he might say something, might finally choose his mother over his wife. I'm sorry, Mom, he whispered. Then he was gone. I watched their car disappear down the drive, then pulled out my phone and texted Agent Kemp. Tomorrow confirmed, they took the bait. I looked at Howard's photograph on the mantel and made him a promise I intended to keep. I won't let them change our name. I won't let them erase us. The final battle was less than 12 hours away, and they had no idea what was coming. The trap was set, but I needed one more piece to fall into place. The morning after Nadine's triumphant departure, I sat in a downtown Austin coffee shop waiting for the man who would help steal my husband's company. Carlton Farrell walked in like a man expecting an ambush, because he was. He spotted me in the back booth immediately. Desmond sat beside me. He was bled a leather briefcase on the table between us. Carlton's eyes darted between us, calculating odds, weighing options. The expensive confidence he usually wore like cologne was gone, replaced by the wariness of a cornered animal. Sit down, Carlton, I said. We need to talk about your future. He slid into the booth across from us, his fingers drumming nervously on the table. The coffee shop hummed with morning chatter. Business people, students, couples enjoying breakfast. None of them had any idea that a conspiracy was unraveling 3 feet away. If this is about the succession documents, Carlton began. Desmond opened his briefcase and pulled out a single sheet of paper. He slid it across the table without ceremony. This agreement was filed with the Texas Secretary of State 3 weeks ago, Desmond said. Seized by Nadine Mercer and witnessed by an attorney I've never heard of. It creates a separate holding company and transfers all financial liability for Mercer Logistics operations to you personally. Carlton's face went pale. He picked up the document, scanning it with increasingly frantic eyes. "She wouldn't," he whispered. "We built this together. 19 years. 19 years of conspiracy. And Carlton had never seen the knife Nadine was sharpening behind his back. He had believed they were partners. He had believed she trusted him. And all along, she had been preparing to sacrifice him the moment things went wrong. "She would," I said quietly. "She did. The question now is what you're going to do about it." Carlton set the paper down, his hands trembling. The color had drained from his face entirely. I watched him process the betrayal, the dawning realization that everything he had built was a lie. "The pension fund," he said slowly. "The shell companies, the wire transfers, all of it traces back to accounts with my signature authority." "Exactly." Desmond's voice was matter-of-fact. "When the federal investigation concludes, you'll be the one holding the bag. Nadine walks away clean. You serve 15 to 20 in federal prison. That was always her plan." Carlton looked genuinely wounded. "From the beginning." I thought of Howard, trusting this man with his finances while Carlton plotted his theft. I thought of the pension fund workers who would lose their retirements. I should have felt nothing but contempt for the man sitting across from me. But there was something almost pitiable about watching him realize he had been used. How do you mourn a friendship that was never real? "I'm not here to gloat," I said. "I'm here to offer you a choice." Carlton's eyes narrowed. "What kind of choice?" "Tomorrow morning, there's going to be a board meeting. Nadine expects me to sign the succession documents. What she doesn't know is that the FBI will be recording everything." I let that sink in. "I'm not asking you to testify against her. I'm just asking you to stay silent. Don't warn her. Let tomorrow happen. And if I refuse," Desmond leaned forward, "then you go down with her. And thanks to this agreement, you go down first. You go down hardest. You go down alone." The coffee shop noise seemed to fade around us. Carlton stared at the document that had sealed his fate, the signature of the woman he had trusted for nearly 2 decades. "What do I get?" he asked finally. "Desmond will represent your interests separately, cooperating witness status, reduced charges, a future that doesn't involve dying in a federal penitentiary." I held his gaze. "Or you can warn Nadine, watch her throw you to the wolves anyway, and spend the rest of your life wondering why you protected someone who was never protecting you." The silence stretched between us. I could see Carlton calculating, weighing loyalty against survival, pride against self-preservation. It was not a difficult calculation. Not really. Carlton's hands shook as he reached for his coffee cup. The first honest thing he had done in 2 decades was choosing to save himself. "Fine," he said. "I'll stay quiet." Smart choice. He started to stand, then paused. Something shifted in his expression. A different kind of calculation. "There's something else," he said slowly. "Something that might help your federal friends." I waited. "Nadine keeps the original documents in a safe, her home office, behind the painting of the bluebonnets." Carlton's voice was steady now, cold with the clarity of revenge. "The originals with Howard's forged signatures. The real paper trail. Everything the FBI would need to make this case airtight." I felt my heart skip. The forged originals, the smoking gun we had been searching for. "Why are you telling me this?" Carlton met my eyes. And for a moment, I saw the man beneath the expensive suits and practiced smiles. A man who had finally realized he had wasted 19 years on a lie. "Because I want you to make her pay," he said, "for both of us." He walked out without looking back. I reached for my phone to call Agent Kemp. The final piece of evidence had a location. And tomorrow morning, Nadine Mercer was going to learn what it felt like to be betrayed. Agent Kemp confirmed he would execute a warrant on Nadine's home safe simultaneously with the board meeting. The forged documents would be in federal custody before she knew the trap had sprung. One piece of the puzzle remained, and it arrived the next morning in the form of a phone call. The phone rang at 9:47 a.m., and I knew before answering that some numbers could break a heart even when the heart already expected them. "Mrs. Mercer, this is Dr. Conrad Whitfield. The voice belonged to our family physician of 30 years, a man who had delivered Brennan and attended Howard through his final illness, a man I trusted with secrets that never left his office. "I have the results from your grandson's checkup." I gripped the kitchen counter. "Tell me." "The DNA comparison you requested is conclusive." A pause. 0% probability of paternal relation between Brennan and Glenn. 0%. In mathematics, 0 means nothing. In families, 0 can mean everything you believed was a lie. I had suspected since the hospital. Since that impossible blood type revealed itself in a trauma ward corridor. But suspicion is not certainty. Hope lives in the space between what you fear and what you know. Now, the space had closed. Brennan, the grandson I had watched grow from infant to young man, the boy I had taught to ride a bicycle and helped with college applications, shared no Mercer blood at all. Glenn had been raising another man's son for over 2 decades. Nadine had built her entire marriage on a foundation of lies. "Thank you, Conrad," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I appreciate your discretion." "Of course, Lorraine, I'm sorry." I ended the call and stood in the kitchen where Howard and I had shared 40 years of morning coffee. The silence pressed against me like a physical weight. The number 0.00% glowed in my mind, a mathematical erasure of everything I had believed about my family. Not just the fraud, not just the theft. The very bloodline I thought continued through my son had been severed before it began. The sound of a car in the driveway pulled me from my thoughts. I watched through the window as Brennan emerged from his truck, a quiet young man who had spent his college years caught between his parents' expectations and his own uncertain path. He walked toward the house with an envelope clutched in his hands, his face pale and determined. I met him in the garden, among the yellow roses Howard had planted. "Grandma," his voice cracked on the word, "I got a copy of the results. Mom doesn't know I went to the lab." He held out the envelope. The same numbers, the same devastating truth. "I don't know who I am anymore," he said, "but I wanted you to have this. I wanted you to know that I know." What makes someone family? The blood in their veins or the love in their choices? I looked at this boy who had called me grandma since he learned to speak, who had picked flowers for me on Mother's Day and cried at Howard's funeral, who stood before me now, terrified that a piece of paper could erase everything we had been to each other. "Brennan," I said gently, "will you still consider me your grandmother?" His eyes filled with tears. "That's what I was going to ask you." I pulled him into my arms and held him the way I had when he was small, when nightmares woke him and only my voice could calm him down. "You didn't choose your parents," I whispered. "You can choose who you become, and you're choosing to be here, with me, with the truth. That makes you mine. That will always make you mine." He sobbed against my shoulder, grief and relief tangled together. I held him and let my own tears fall into the roses Howard had planted, watering them with salt and sorrow. Brennan had walked into my garden as a question mark. He was leaving as an answer I had not expected. Loyalty freely given is worth more than loyalty inherited. When he finally pulled back, wiping his eyes, something shifted in his expression. "There's something else," he said. "Something you need to know." I waited. "Mom's been making calls all week, late at night, when she thinks I'm asleep." Brennan's voice hardened. "She mentioned the Cayman Islands, wire transfers, moving money before Friday." My blood ran cold. "She's planning to run." "I think so. She doesn't know I heard, but—" He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice held a bitterness I had never heard from him before. "She called me her insurance policy once, when I was 16. She thought I was asleep. I never understood what she meant until now." Insurance policy. A child conceived to secure her position in the Mercer family. A boy who was never loved for himself, only for what he represented. The rage that filled me was pure and cold. "Thank you for telling me," I said. "Now go home, act normal, don't let her know you've spoken to me." "What are you going to do?" I looked at the roses, at the house Howard built, at everything Nadine thought she was about to steal. "I'm going to make sure she doesn't get the chance to run." Agent Kemp moved fast once I told him about the Cayman Islands. Federal agents would be positioned at every exit. Nadine would walk into the boardroom expecting victory and walk out in handcuffs. All I had to do was play my part one last time. I walked into Mercer Logistics wearing the navy dress from my first $1 million signing, the same dress Howard had kissed me in when we closed that deal 3 decades ago. Every head in the lobby turned to watch. The employees who had been whispering about the grieving widow saw something else entirely that morning. They saw the woman who had built this company alongside her husband. Raymond, the security guard who had worked our front desk for 22 years, stood up from his station as I approached. "Mrs. Mercer," he said, his weathered face breaking into a genuine smile. "It's good to see you back." "It's good to be back, Raymond." I met his eyes, and he saw what I needed him to see: strength, purpose, the end of mourning and the beginning of something else. "It's good to be back." I took the elevator to the executive floor alone, savoring the silence. The doors opened onto the corridor where Howard and I had walked together 1,000 times. His photograph still hung on the wall, younger, laughing, full of the energy that had driven him to build an empire from nothing. The boardroom doors waited at the end of the hall. The boardroom table was the same one where Howard had signed his first major contract. Now his widow sat at its head, and the vultures assembled around her had no idea they had mistaken a hawk for a dove. Nadine occupied Howard's chair at the far end, dressed in black as though she were attending a funeral. Glenn sat beside her, pale and rigid. Carlton was present but silent, his eyes carefully neutral, keeping his end of our bargain. And Brennan, my unexpected ally, sat near the door with an expression of controlled tension. The succession documents waited on the table before me. The pen rested beside them like a loaded weapon. "Shall we begin?" Nadine's voice was silk over steel. "I believe you've had adequate time to review the terms." I picked up the pen, turning it slowly in my fingers. The room held its breath. "I have a few questions first," I said mildly. Nadine's smile tightened. "Questions, Lorraine. We've been over this. The documents are straightforward. Sign, and you can return to your garden." Questions about the pension fund. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Carlton's neutral expression flickered. Glenn's eyes darted to his wife. Nadine's smile became fixed, frozen. "I don't know what you're referring to," she said carefully. "I think you do." Glenn's face showed something I had not seen in years. Shame. My son was finally seeing his wife clearly, and he did not like what he saw. But he still said nothing. He still sat beside her, trapped by years of complicity and cowardice. "Sign the papers, Lorraine." Nadine's patience was eroding. "Your husband is dead. The company needs leadership. Stop playing games you don't understand." "I understand perfectly." I set the pen down gently, deliberately. "I understand the shell companies. I understand the wire transfers. I understand the forged signatures on documents that were created months before Howard was ever diagnosed." Nadine's composure cracked. The mask she had worn for 19 years of marriage began to slip, revealing the rage and entitlement beneath. "Your husband talked about family values while treating me like furniture," she spat. 20 years of smiling at his jokes and attending his charity galas while he built his precious legacy. "Sign the papers, Lorraine. His legacy is already dead." The room went silent. Some moments define a life. Every choice I had made in the past 10 days had led to this boardroom, this pen, this woman who had just revealed her true self before witnesses. "You just insulted my husband for the last time," I said quietly. "I'm not signing anything." Nadine's hand slammed against the table with a crack that echoed off the walls. "You think you can stop this?" Her voice rose to a shriek I had never heard from her, all pretense of sophistication gone. "I have the board votes. I have the legal authority. You're just a widow with a worthless signature." She nodded to someone behind me. "Remove her from the building." The boardroom door opened. But it was not security who walked through. Agent Marshall Kemp entered first, his FBI badge visible on his belt. 2 agents in Navy windbreakers flanked him, their faces professionally blank. Behind them, I caught a glimpse of more agents in the corridor, positioned. I knew at every exit of the building. Nadine's face went white. "Nadine Mercer," Agent Kemp said, his voice carrying the weight of federal authority. FBI, you're going to want to sit down. I watched my daughter-in-law's world collapse in the space between one heartbeat and the next. Watched the triumph drain from her eyes and terror rush in to fill the void. Watched her finally understand that the grieving widow she had planned to destroy had been hunting her all along. The trap had sprung. And Nadine Mercer was exactly where I wanted her. Desmond walked in behind Agent Kemp, carrying a leather folder with the calm of a man delivering a verdict that had already been written. The fluorescent lights caught the FBI badges like judgment rendered in metal. Nadine had frozen in her seat, her face cycling through emotions too fast to catalog: confusion, fear, rage, and finally the dawning realization that she had been outmaneuvered by the woman she had dismissed as a grieving widow. "What is this?" Her voice cracked. "You can't just—" "Nadine Mercer." Agent Kemp's tone brooked no interruption. "FBI, please remain seated." Desmond set the leather folder on the boardroom table and opened it with deliberate precision. Document after document fanned across the polished wood financial records. Wire transfer confirmations, forged signatures, shell company registrations. The paper trail that Nadine had believed was hidden in cold storage facilities and offshore accounts laid bare for everyone to see. "These documents detail 19 years of embezzlement," Desmond said. "Over $2 million stolen from the Mercer Logistics Pension Fund. Shell companies created to launder the proceeds. Forged signatures on trust documents. And a succession agreement designed to frame Lorraine Mercer for crimes she didn't commit." The color drained from Nadine's face. Carlton's chair scraped against the floor as he stood. Every assumption Nadine had made about loyalty died in that sound. "I'll be cooperating fully with the federal investigation," Carlton announced, his voice flat and final. "My attorney has already provided a complete statement." Nadine's head whipped toward him. "Carlton, you're betraying me. After everything. You betrayed me 3 years ago." Carlton's face showed nothing but cold satisfaction. "When you signed papers making me your fall guy, I found them in your safe right where you thought no one would look. I'm just returning the favor." "You bastard." "Mrs. Mercer." Agent Kemp stepped forward. "Stand up, please. Place your hands behind your back." For a moment, I thought she might run. Thought she might overturn the table. Throw herself at the window. Do anything other than submit. But there were agents at every door, and Nadine had always been practical above all else. Even now, facing the collapse of everything she had built, she was calculating odds. She found none in her favor. She stood slowly, her designer heels clicking one final time on the boardroom floor. Agent Kemp produced handcuffs, and the click of metal against her wrists seemed impossibly loud in the silence. 19 years of conspiracy ended with the click of handcuffs, a sound so small for a betrayal so large. "Nadine Mercer, you have the right to remain silent," Agent Kemp recited. "Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney." "I gave this family 19 years. Nadine's composure shattered completely. Her voice rose to a scream that echoed off the walls of the boardroom, where Howard had built his empire. 19 years of pretending to be grateful for scraps. 19 years of smiling at that old man's jokes while he treated me like furniture. "I suggest you use your right to remain silent," Agent Kemp said mildly. But Nadine was beyond reason now. As the agents began to lead her toward the door, she twisted in their grip, her eyes finding Glenn, still frozen in his seat, pale as death. "You want to know the truth. Glenn," her voice dropped to something poisonous. "Ask your son who his real father is. Ask him why he has a blood type that's genetically impossible if you were actually his father." The words hit Glenn like a physical blow. He staggered, gripping the edge of the table. "What?" His voice cracked. "What did you just say?" "Brennan isn't yours." Nadine's smile was ugly with triumph, the last weapon of a woman with nothing left to lose. "He never was. I made sure of that before I ever married you. Ask your mother. She knows. She's had the DNA results for days." The agents dragged her through the door. Her screaming faded down the corridor, growing distant, then silent. The boardroom that had witnessed Howard's greatest triumphs now witnessed his widow's greatest victory. He would have hated the drama. but he would have loved the justice. Glenn stood motionless, staring at the door through which his wife had vanished. Then, slowly, mechanically, he turned to look at Brennan, then at me. "Mom." His voice was barely a whisper. What did she mean? What did she mean about Brennan's real father? The DNA report sat on the table between us, the document Desmond had placed with all the other evidence. The truth I had been carrying for days, waiting for the right moment to reveal. Brennan's face had gone pale, but he met his father's eyes without flinching. "It's true," Brennan said quietly. "I got tested. 0% match." Glenn's legs gave out. He dropped into his chair like a man whose strings had been cut, staring at the young man he had raised from infancy, the young man who shared no blood with him at all. "I didn't know," Glenn whispered. "All these years, I didn't know." I watched my son's world collapse for the second time that morning. First his wife, now his son. The victory I had planned turned to ash in my mouth. The DNA report lay open on the table between us, but Glenn had stopped looking at it. His eyes were fixed on the second folder Desmond had placed before him, the one detailing 8 years of silent participation in his wife's crimes. "Mom, I was scared," Glenn's voice cracked. Tears streamed down his face, the face that looked so much like Howard's it made my chest ache. "Nadine said she'd take Brennan and leave if I didn't cooperate. She said she'd destroy me. I didn't know what else to do." "You could have come to me." My voice was steadier than I felt. "You could have told your father. You could have chosen your family over your fear." I was trying to protect my family. "You were protecting yourself." Desmond's voice cut through Glenn's protests. He opened the second folder and spread its contents across the table. Bank records show payments totaling $180,000 deposited into an account in your name over the past 8 years. Consulting fees from shell companies that didn't exist. Glenn went pale. "You weren't just complicit out of fear," Desmond continued. "You were being paid. Your silence had a price, and you collected it every month." The defense Glenn had been building, the terrified husband manipulated by a stronger wife, crumbled into dust. He had not been a victim. He had been a partner. Glenn had Howard's eyes. Watching them fill with tears while I ended his place in the family was like watching Howard cry. And I had never been able to bear that. But Howard had never betrayed me. Howard had never stolen from the company he built. Howard had never sold his integrity for a monthly deposit. "Mom," Glenn reached across the table. "Please, I'm your son." I pulled my hands away. "You were my son," I said quietly. "Now you're a stranger who helped steal from your father's grave." I nodded to Desmond, and he produced 2 documents from his briefcase. An eviction notice for the guest house Glenn and his family had occupied for 15 years. A termination letter ending his position at Mercer Logistics, effective immediately. "You have 48 hours to vacate the property," I said. "Your personal belongings will be boxed and delivered to whatever address you provide. Do not contact me. Do not come to the estate. Do not attempt to enter any Mercer Logistics facility." "You can't do this!" Glenn's voice rose. "I'm your son. I'm family." Family doesn't steal. Family doesn't lie. Family doesn't watch their father die while plotting to rob their mother. I stood, and my legs held steady beneath me, a small miracle I had not expected. "I never gave you a reason to fear me, Glenn. You chose to fear the wrong person. That was your choice. These are the consequences." Glenn stared at me as if seeing me for the first time. Perhaps he was. The mother who had bandaged his scraped knees and cheered at his graduations had been replaced by something harder, something forged in grief and betrayal. He left without another word. The door closed behind him with a soft click that felt like the end of something I had spent 42 years building. Brennan had waited in the corner, silent through the entire confrontation. Now he approached the table where I sat alone, surrounded by the debris of a family that had torn itself apart. "Grandma," his voice was gentle. "What happens to me now?" I looked at this young man who shared no blood with me, but had chosen loyalty over lies. Who had come to me with the truth when he could have stayed silent? Who had warned me about his mother's escape plans when he could have let her run? The boardroom table could seat 12. Now it held one woman, one young man with uncertain eyes, and the weight of generations that had nearly been destroyed. 1 year of tuition, I said. That's what I can give you. After that, you build your own future, your own name, your own life. Brennan nodded slowly. I want to build something myself, like you and Grandpa did, from nothing. You're not starting from nothing. I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. You're starting from knowing what integrity costs, what it means to choose truth over comfort. That's more than most people have. He smiled, a small, uncertain thing, but real. Then he stood, kissed my cheek the way he had since childhood, and walked out of the boardroom. I was alone. Victory, it turns out, tastes like silence, like an empty room. Like winning everything and losing everyone, except the ghost of a man who would have hated every minute of this fight. I reached into my purse for Howard's letter, the one I had read the night before the board meeting. My eyes found a line I had skipped in my grief. A postscript written in his shaky hand. P.S. The safe deposit box at First Texas Bank contains something you'll need when this is over. The key is in my desk. I always knew you'd win. My husband had left me one more secret. I folded the letter and tucked it back into my purse. Then I stood, straightened the navy dress that had carried me through battle, and walked out of the boardroom. The war was over, but Howard still had something to tell me. The safe deposit box contained Howard's wedding ring and a note. Keep fighting. I love you forever. I wore the ring on a chain around my neck for the next 6 months. Through depositions and grand jury testimony and the slow grinding machinery of federal justice. 6 months later, I sat in a federal courtroom and watched the woman who had tried to steal my life receive 15 years to think about it. Judge Patricia Harmon, a silver-haired woman with 30 years on the federal bench, delivered the sentence with the same measured tone she might use to read a grocery list. Nadine Mercer, this court sentences you to 15 years in federal prison for wire fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit securities fraud. Nadine stood at the defense table in an orange prison uniform, her designer suits and perfect manicure long gone. The woman who had once commanded boardrooms with a single glance now stared at the floor, shoulders hunched, stripped of every weapon she had ever wielded. Prison uniforms are great equalizers. Nadine had entered federal custody looking like what she had pretended to be, a sophisticated businesswoman caught in unfortunate circumstances. She left in chains, looking exactly like what she was, a common thief with expensive taste. Carlton received 12 years reduced for his cooperation. He passed me in the courthouse corridor afterward, federal marshals on either side. I hope it was worth it, he said. Every day. He had nothing left to say to that. They led him away, and I walked out into the January sun, pulling my coat tighter against the cold Austin wind. 15 years, the same amount of time Howard and I had spent building what Nadine tried to destroy in 6 months. The same number of Christmas mornings she would miss, birthdays she would spend behind bars, seasons she would watch change through reinforced windows. I should have felt triumphant. I felt hollow instead. The pension fund had been fully restored, every dollar recovered through asset seizure and restitution. The employees who had trusted Howard and me with their retirements would receive everything they were owed. The Mercer Logistics name remained on the building, on the trucks, on the legacy we had built together. Victory. Complete and total victory. So why did it taste like ash? That evening, I sat in Howard's study with a glass of wine and the investigator's report I had commissioned 3 months earlier. The folder had arrived that morning, and I had been avoiding it all day. Now, in the quiet of the house we had built together, I finally opened it. The subject of the report was my son. Glenn had moved to Houston after the eviction. He lived in a 1-bedroom apartment on the 3rd floor of a complex that catered to recently divorced men and people starting over. He worked as a delivery driver for a small logistics company. Ironic given his origins. His route took him through suburban neighborhoods where families lived lives nothing like the one he had destroyed. Does a mother ever stop loving her child? Or does she just learn to love from a distance too great to bridge? The investigator's notes were clinical, professional. Subject maintains routine employment. No contact with former associates. Appearance to live within modest means. Daily purchase of yellow roses from corner florist. Yellow roses. My roses. The ones Howard had planted for our anniversary 30 years ago. Glenn had helped plant them when he was 9 years old, covered in dirt and laughing while his father showed him how to dig the holes just right. Some memories should stay buried with the people who earned them. I turned the page and stopped. A photograph showed Glenn standing outside a church, speaking with a man in a clerical collar. The caption read, "Subject attends weekly grief counseling sessions." Investigators spoke briefly with counselor, who confirmed subject has been processing guilt and loss. Subject mentioned he is writing a letter to his mother, has not mailed it yet. A letter, somewhere in Houston. My son was finding words to say to me, words he had not been able to speak in the boardroom in the months before, in all the years he had watched his wife steal from his parents and said nothing. I stared at the photograph for a long time. Glenn looked older than 42, thinner. The expensive suits were gone, replaced by a delivery company polo. His eyes had the hollow look of a man who had lost everything and was only beginning to understand why. The investigator had included a final note. Subject has made no attempt to contact Mrs. Mercer directly. All indications suggest he is waiting for permission that may never come. I folded the report and set it aside. The question was not whether Glenn was sorry. The question was whether sorry was enough. I looked at Howard's photograph on the desk, the one from our wedding day. Both of us so young and certain that love could conquer anything. "What would you do?" I whispered to his smiling face. "Would you forgive him?" The photograph gave no answer. Howard had always been better at forgiveness than I was. He had seen good in people I had written off, found second chances where I saw only betrayal. But Howard was gone, and I was the one who had to decide what happened next. The letter Glenn was writing sat somewhere in Houston, unfinished. I was not ready to read it. Not yet. I set the investigator's report aside and did not think about Glenn's unmailed letter. There were 300 employees who needed to hear that their futures were secure, and I owed them that much before I dealt with my own unfinished business. The employees who had almost lost everything gathered in the same room where I had almost lost everything. The conference hall that had witnessed board meetings and holiday parties now held faces I had known for decades: drivers, dispatchers, mechanics, accountants. Faces that had trusted Howard Mercer with their retirements and their futures. Today, I would give them back what had been stolen. 6 months ago, I began, standing at the podium where Howard had delivered dozens of speeches. You learned that people you trusted had betrayed that trust. Money that belonged to your pension fund had been stolen. Your retirements were at risk. Silence. 300 faces watching me. Waiting. Today I can tell you that every dollar has been recovered, every penny returned. The pension fund is fully restored, and not one of you lost a single cent. The applause started slowly and built until it filled the room. I saw tears on weathered faces. Saw couples gripping each other's hands. Saw the relief of people who had spent months wondering if their life's work had been for nothing. These faces had trusted Howard for decades. They had trusted me for 53 terrible days while I fought to save what he built. Today I could finally tell them their trust had been worth it. But I didn't do this alone. I gestured toward the side of the room. "Eugene Thornton, would you come up here?" Eugene emerged from the crowd, his weathered face flushed with embarrassment. He climbed the steps to the stage reluctantly, standing beside me like a man who wanted to be anywhere else. "This man," I said, and a network of drivers who had been fired for their loyalty, risked everything to help me find the truth. They watched, they reported, they did what needed to be done when official channels had been corrupted. I turned to face him directly. "Eugene Thornton, you are the reason we're still standing. All of you, remember his name." Eugene shifted his weight, uncomfortable with the attention. "Just did what Mr. Mercer would have wanted, ma'am," he said quietly. "We all did." The applause was louder this time. Eugene nodded once, then retreated back into the crowd where he was more comfortable. But I saw the younger employees looking at him differently now. The invisible driver had become visible. That evening, I sat in my garden among the flowers Howard had planted, watching the winter sun set over the hills. The phone rang, and Brennan's name lit up the screen. "Grandma!" His voice held an excitement I had not heard in months. "I got the internship." "Which one?" The logistics company in Dallas. Small operation, 12 trucks, family-owned. They don't even know I'm connected to Mercer Logistics." He paused. I applied under a different name. Howard had planted sunflowers in this garden because they always turned toward light. Brennan was doing the same thing, turning toward a future he could build himself. "Tell me," I said. "I legally changed my last name 3 months ago to Mom's maiden name before she married Glenn." His voice wavered slightly. "I hope you're not upset. I needed to be someone new. Someone who isn't connected to everything that happened." I thought about the boy who had come to me with DNA results, who had warned me about his mother's escape plans, who had chosen truth over family loyalty. He had earned the right to define himself. "I'm not upset," I said softly. "I'm proud." "Really? Your grandfather would be proud too. The Mercer name isn't what matters. What you build with it is." I looked at the sunflowers, dormant now in the winter cold, but ready to bloom again in spring. What matters is that you carry forward the values, the work ethic, the integrity. Those things don't have a name attached to them. Some legacies are passed through blood. The better ones are passed through choice. Brennan had chosen to carry forward everything good about this family and leave the rest behind. "I want to build something myself," he said, "from scratch, like you and Grandpa did. Then do it, and call me every Sunday to tell me how it's going." He laughed a real laugh, unburdened. "I will. I promise." After we hung up, I sat in the garden as darkness settled over the estate. The cold January air bit at my cheeks, but I was not ready to go inside, not yet. When I finally gathered the day's mail from the kitchen counter, I almost missed it. A single envelope, no return address, Houston postmark. My son's handwriting on the front, the same careful script Howard had taught him when Glenn was 7 years old. Practicing letters at the kitchen table while I made dinner. Glenn's letter had finally arrived. I held it in my hands for a long moment, feeling the weight of everything it might contain. Apologies, excuses, explanations, perhaps even the truth I had been waiting to hear. The question was whether I was ready to read it. I looked at Howard's photograph on the mantel. His smile gave no answers. I set the letter on the kitchen table, unopened, and went to bed. Tomorrow, I would decide tomorrow. The rooftop garden of Mercer Logistics headquarters had never hosted a signing ceremony before. But then again, nothing about the past 6 months had followed tradition. I stood at the portable table Carlton had arranged, watching the morning sun paint golden streaks across downtown. The skyline looked different from up here, smaller somehow, less intimidating than it had seemed when Howard first brought me to this building 43 years ago. A nervous bride, wondering if she would ever belong in his world. Now I owned that world, and I was about to give most of it away. "Mrs. Mercer, we're ready whenever you are." Carlton adjusted his glasses, spreading the documents across the table with practiced precision. Behind him, the company's senior leadership had gathered in a semicircle. Eugene stood among them, though he did not yet know why I had specifically requested his presence. I picked up the pen Howard had used to sign the company's original incorporation papers. The weight of it felt right in my hand. The smell of rooftop lavender mixed with diesel from the trucks idling 7 stories below. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell marked the hour. 9 chimes. The same time Howard had proposed to me in his mother's garden. Both of us too young to know what forever really meant. The first document establishes the Howard Mercer Employee Stock Ownership Plan, Carlton announced, his voice carrying across the rooftop. 50% of Mercer Logistics shares will be transferred into an ESOP trust, making every full-time employee a partial owner of the company they help build. Gasps rippled through the assembled executives. I signed my name without hesitation. The second document creates the Mercer Family Scholarship Fund. Carlton's voice softened. The remaining 50% of shares will generate dividends funding full-ride scholarships for first-generation college students in the trucking and logistics industry. Another signature, 43 years of accumulated wealth, redistributed with 2 strokes of a pen. The twist that had brought me to this moment was not revenge. It was clarity. Glenn's betrayal had stripped away every illusion I had carried about legacy and inheritance. Money passed to ungrateful heirs did not honor Howard's memory. It corrupted it. But money invested in workers who drove the trucks, loaded the freight, and kept the wheels turning, That was legacy. Money opening doors for kids who reminded me of the hungry young man Howard had been before anyone believed in him. That was immortality. There's one more matter. I set down the pen and turned to face Eugene Chen. Effective immediately, Eugene is promoted to Operations Director, reporting directly to the new CEO. Eugene's face cycled through confusion, disbelief, and something that looked dangerously close to tears. Mrs. Mercer, I don't know what to say. Say you'll work half as hard as you did helping me dismantle my son's scheme. I extended my hand. And say you'll call me Lorraine. 30 years ago, Howard had promoted a warehouse worker named Samuel Chen to shift supervisor. Everyone said he was crazy. Elevating someone without a business degree, Samuel retired as VP of Operations. His son Eugene had just earned the same chance. The signing ceremony concluded with champagne I did not drink and congratulations I barely heard. My mind had already drifted to the envelope waiting in my garden at home. Glenn's letter, delivered 3 days ago, still unopened. I left the rooftop celebration early, letting Carlton handle the remaining formalities. Some moments required witnesses. Others demanded solitude. Dawn the next morning found me in the garden, seated on the bench Howard had built the summer before his diagnosis. The envelope felt thin, probably not the lengthy apology I had imagined during sleepless nights. I opened it anyway. 3 sentences. That was all Glenn had written. Mom, I am getting help. I do not expect forgiveness. But I wanted you to know I finally understand what I lost. No excuses, no blame, no request for money or reconciliation. The paper was plain white, no letterhead. His handwriting had changed since childhood, tighter and more controlled, but I recognized the way he still crossed his sevens, a habit he had learned from his father. I sat with those 3 sentences until the sun climbed above the oak trees. Then I pulled out my phone and typed a message I had never expected to send. The door is not locked, but you will have to knock. I did not know if Glenn would ever knock. I did not know if I would answer if he did. But for the first time since discovering his betrayal, the question did not feel like a wound. It felt like possibility. Howard's rose bushes needed pruning. The scholarship fund needed board members. Eugene needed mentoring. Life, it turned out, did not pause for family drama. I pocketed my phone and reached for the gardening shears. The future was not about what I had lost. It was about what I chose to grow next. And to you listening to my story, remember this. What started as a revenge story became something far greater than I ever expected. I thought I wanted justice. I thought I wanted to make Glenn and Nadine pay for every lie, every forged signature, every moment they made me feel like nothing. But revenge alone would have left me just as empty as they were. Do not make my mistake of waiting until betrayal forces you to see clearly. I spent years ignoring small signs because I wanted to believe the best in my own son. I trusted when I should have questioned. I gave when I should have protected. If something feels wrong in your family, trust that feeling. Do not wait for the bomb to go off before you open your eyes. This grand drama story taught me that legacy is not about what you leave behind for ungrateful heirs. It is about what you build for those who truly deserve it. I believe God put me through this trial for a reason, to show me that my worth was never tied to my son's approval. Howard's company now belongs to the workers who built it and the students who will carry its spirit forward. That is the only inheritance that matters. Every grand drama story and revenge story you hear carries a lesson. Mine is simple. Protect what you have built, but never let bitterness become your only reward. If this story touched you, please leave a comment below and tell me what you would have done in my place. Share this with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you have not already, please subscribe so you never miss another story like this one. Thank you for staying until the very end. Your time means everything to me. As a final note, some details in this story have been fictionalized for storytelling purposes. Any resemblance to real individuals is purely coincidental. What matters most is the message. God bless you all.